This way, there we go. I am going to record this conversation. This way we're able to put it onto our RPCVnexus.org website, as well as our Spotify channel as well. This way, anybody who is interested in the sector of refugee resettlement and everything along those lines is able to listen in at any given point as they're trying to find out about what this career is like, how to get into it themselves. But as we start things off, I really want to give a shout out and thank Anneke, Judith, Daniel, and Sarah. We've got Daniel McBrayer and Daniel Kosten for joining us this evening. And as I'm getting everybody set up and pinned, this way we're able to see you all. RPCV Nexus is doing this in collaboration with our friends over at the Peace Corps community for refugees itself. So before we start things off and get into the career conversation, I'm actually going to highlight Evelyn Gansglass here, and she's going to give us a quick overview of what the refugee process is for those who are interested in and trying to learn a little bit more about it.
On behalf of Peace Corps Community for Refugees, it's a long title, I really want to welcome you to this webinar as well. I don't know if all of you know about us. I guess half of you are from Nexus and the other half from us. But I just wanted to tell you what our mission is and what we really do. And what we really try to do is mobilize the Peace Corps community to take action on refugees, whether it's through employment or volunteering or raising money. So we try to inspire folks and inform them of what opportunities there are. And we try to showcase what different Peace Corps organizations, the various affiliates of National Peace Corps Association and others are doing in the field. So my little intro is to just highlight, well, the complexity of the whole refugee process, but that there are just a variety of jobs in government, in the international sector, in nonprofits overseas and in the United States and throughout the country that are all part of this refugee resettlement process. And this first slide, let me just say they both look really complicated because this process is complicated. And I've been trying to help people at the local level do this work. And if you think it's complicated for you, it's really complicated for refugees. But this slide was produced by Deloitte, which is a consulting firm. And basically, it just shows the process mostly overseas, where refugees are vetted through the United Nations, then through the State Department, then Homeland Security. There may be some contractors included along the way in different countries. So we kind of skip over that. But it's mostly government work in the early stage of the whole refugee resettlement process. And then why don't you go to the next slide? And we'll put links to these slides in the chat. They're really just here to highlight the different kinds of jobs that are available. So why don't you go to the next one?
Yep. So this is the second half of that first
thing.
It was so small that I split it up like that.
Oh, okay. So as I said, you start with the United Nations. It goes to the State Department, to various parts within the State Department. You'll hear more of that later on. Then it's vetting through Department of Homeland Security, and then then they're approved and come to the United States. Yeah. And then really HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, takes over some of that activity. And Department of Health and Human Services has 10 designated, oh no, I guess it's Department of State sends the request, I'm sorry, to the Department of Human Resources. So then there are 10 refugee agencies, federally designated refugee agencies. In the slide you're going to see in a moment, was produced by Catholic Charities. That's just one of the 10 agencies. There's also Highest, Lutheran Social Services, IRC, and a number of other agencies. And they are the 10 national refugee resettlement agencies, and different ones work in different parts of the country. So depending on where you want to work, it may be one or the other ones that's designated for that area. And then those federally designated refugee agencies that are all nonprofits then partner with a whole set of other nonprofits, whether it's for health services, for education, for housing, the whole range of services that are provided. And those partner organizations also then work, so they all hire people at the local level. They then work with government again to get refugee benefits paid, for Medicaid, for SNAP benefits. So there's an interaction again between nonprofits and government.
Mhm.
And then there are just a plethora of additional local organizations that are involved. And we can't list all of them, but it's really a question of where in this whole process your interest is, where your expertise is, whether you want to work in this country or overseas. And I'll just, as I said, we'll put this on board. It's not important to just see the details, but to recognize this is a very long process and there are jobs along this whole process. So I'll turn it back to you, Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Evelyn, for giving us that insight on things. And to that point, as Evelyn was just pointing out, it's quite a long process, and we need to be able to provide a good amount of information for each. So to be able to showcase that, we've got some people who are going to join us this evening and talk a little bit about their own perspectives, their own work at these various points, both from the international to the federal to the local levels, and how they've been able to make an impact and help a lot of refugees. So again, thank you very much to Anneke Valk, Judith Gomez, Daniel McBrayer, Daniel Kosten, and Sarah Riendeau. And again, if all of you could do a quick introduction on what Peace Corps country that you served in and a little brief understanding of your path from service into the jobs that you're currently sitting at, what that means for skills, what that meant for any kind of additional degrees, certificates, trainings, etc. And then from there, we'll do a little bit of a popcorn series of various questions that I've got, that everybody has sent in to me, and that people will start putting into the chat as well. So, Judith, I've got you in the top left corner. We'll start off with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judith Gomez, and I served in the Dominican Republic from 2017 to 2019. Yeah, so I can just start off with what my path was from service. So after service, I knew that I wanted to obtain my degree in social work, and I knew that I wanted to work in designing and managing programs. It's kind of what I did in the Peace Corps while I was a youth, family, community development volunteer. So I came back right before the pandemic, and I ended up signing up to get my master's degree from Hunter. So I obtained my social work degree in organizational management and leadership with a focus on immigration and refugees. During that time, I interned with an organization that did not have, that the mission was not immigration and refugees, but it was helping people coming home from prison. But obviously there were people there that also needed help learning about their status and what they were eligible for. So during my second year, I interned at an organization whose mission was to protect old children from trafficking. And after my internship, I decided to stay on with them, and I became the deputy director there for educational initiatives. And I was focusing on a grant that focused on spreading awareness to migrant parents and caregivers about human trafficking and CSAM. So this grant, along with other professional experiences, an experience specifically with a youth from another role that I had as a global youth ambassador when I traveled to Nicaragua, where I met a young man who was not able to get a job because of his father's political affiliations. Those kinds of experiences made me realize that I really wanted to work with the migrant population. And so I interviewed for the position that I have now as the Associate Director of Refugee Resettlement at Catholic Charities New York, Community Services of New York. And I've been here for about 8 months.
Thank you, Judith.
you.
Anneke, I'll pass over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Anneke Valk, and that's okay. It's a weird name, so no worries. So I served in Georgia, also known as the Republic of Georgia, in between 2013 and 2015. I was an education specialist, so teaching English grades kindergarten through 12th grade. And then in addition to that, co-founded with some of our country nationals, as well as fellow Peace Corps volunteers, to make GLOW, so Girls Leading Our World. That's a girls leadership initiative and empowerment initiative that's around different Peace Corps communities, but we were able to make that an operating NGO, so that's kind of exciting. But the work that I was doing, teaching a lot of English, and then specifically in Georgia, I was working in addition to my normal project, going out and working with IDPs, so internally displaced persons, so refugees within their own country, essentially. And so I was getting just a lot of exposure with that, and always drawn to working with people from different countries, and then just hearing struggles and anything that I could help or assist with, or just taking the skills and knowledge that I had acquired, or just my excitement to learn and to help. So that led me on to, after my service, going to graduate school at the University of Texas in Austin, getting my master's in social work, and with a concentration in policy and administration. And during my studies there, I did an internship with Refugee Services of Texas as a medical case manager, and learning about all the ins and outs, and just how, most of us know how complicated the health system is for Americans in general, let alone a new culture, a new language, in addition to all the million other things you're trying to do when you resettle in the country. So definitely trying to figure out how to do that. I was able to marry my undergrad studies with like cultural anthropology and global studies. And after that internship in my studies, and my first job was in 2017. It was kind of a hard year for refugee resettlement, if folks remember. So I actually was an AmeriCorps Vista, so volunteered again, and served as a volunteer coordinator for Catholic Charities for their immigration and refugee program. So that was exciting, connecting families with family mentors, and did a little bit of volunteer coordinating in different and other nonprofits. And then in 2020, found my way into USCRI, so that's U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. It's one of the VOLAGs that was mentioned or had was alluded to, that takes on refugees in addition to other programs, but resettles refugees. And I specifically work in the refugee medical assistance program. So that's a program that allows for coverage up to 12 months of health coverage for newly arrived refugees and asylees and various immigration statuses by ORR. But what I found is a lot of the skills leading up to these these different positions that I was finding and interested in. I think one of the biggest things was just perseverance. I'd especially wanting to work in refugee resettlement. And again, at a time in 2017, the previous administration was a little bit maybe not as friendly with social services. So it was a little bit harder to find jobs at that point. So any way I could get involved, whether it was volunteering or just networking and just being involved, which is what led me actually to this group as well. So with PCC for refugees, which has been amazing. But yeah, I think networking, perseverance, and also just knowing, highlighting your skill set of whatever's thrown at you. Again, that kind of goes with the perseverance things. Like, you survived Peace Corps, you did it, or you're interested in it and you want to learn more. The fact that you're throwing yourself out there and you just keep doing it, I think is invaluable to any job sector that you want to work in, but especially I would say in this one.
Thank you. Thank you. Dan McBrayer, over to you.
All right. Hold on. Excuse me. I did not want to clear my throat in your ears. This is wonderful that Peace Corps Georgia is so well represented on this call. I also served there. I was in the first group from 2001 to 2003, a little while back there in the day. And I also came to work with displaced people from my experience in Peace Corps Georgia, working with internally displaced people in a community that had been about 10,000 during the late Soviet period and doubled to 20,000 in the early 90s during ethnic conflicts in Georgia. And so I had a front row seat. I was teaching, also teaching English, and many of my students had been displaced in their early years, some of them babies being carried through the mountains to hopeful safety. And yeah, that was very powerful and stuck with me. And beginning then, I wanted to work in refugee resettlement and eventually at PRM. Actually, it took me about 20 years to do that, but here I am. And let's see, what else? I went to grad school after that, shortly thereafter, and studied international development, go Bobcats, Ohio University. And while there, I was fortunate to apply for a Fulbright and get it. And it was in Georgia, and the project was about internal displacement. So I tried to build on my passion and my experience. And I understand that you can't always do Fulbright in a country where you did Peace Corps. Some people say you can't, but I wanted to, and I pushed forward and I did that. And that was a very important experience because just before I went there, Russia invaded in 2008. And it completely changed my project. I was going to work with the quote unquote old IDPs, but I thought I might have a more direct impact on livelihoods and lives in general by working with those who had just been displaced. So that's what I did. I monitored their mainly health and food through Transparency International, NGO that monitors corruption around the world. And after that, I honestly did various things and had various experiences, from international education to global health. I entered federal service at the National Institutes of Health and worked there for several years. Then I found myself at Peace Corps headquarters. So checked off one of the little dreams there, and I worked there for 6 years. Sadly, 3 of those were during the COVID years. So not exactly what I had imagined. So many volunteers who were there and had to evacuate, of course, it wasn't what they had imagined. So I feel for them, and I want to acknowledge that when I say what I say about my experience, because I definitely don't equate them. And when I was finishing up, I was very lucky that I sent the right email at the right time to the right person who at State Department who needed some assistance with Afghans who were being brought in during Operation Allies Welcome. And I think we have a chance later to talk about how, more details on that kind of thing. But very lucky I got to do that. And I've been there now at the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration for almost 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Now over to the other Dan Kosten.
Thank you very much. I think I'm probably going to go back a lot further here. I served in the Peace Corps. At that time, I served in what was Zaire, it is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I was a fish cultural extension agent. We taught people how to raise fish using gravity flow from streams and brooks. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years in that position. And then in Zaire, there was a third-year option to be a regional representative. And I was a regional representative for the Peace Corps in what was Kasai Oriental, basically overseeing the work of the other Peace Corps volunteers in that region. We had a regional home there where the Peace Corps volunteers could come in to get their vaccinations and to get supplies. After my time in the Peace Corps, I had actually several months, probably around 6 months left of my Peace Corps term to complete. And the Peace Corps allowed me to work with another organization working in the country. It was a mission organization working with the disabled population, primarily due to river blindness in Zaire. And I worked for them for that 6 months. And after that was offered a position with them, returned to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and actually returned 2 different terms, serving almost 8 years with that organization, and then transitioned into refugee resettlement. When I returned to the United States, I was hired by one of those 10 agencies, World Relief. I worked for World Relief for 15 years, becoming eventually starting as the director of their resettlement services and then the senior vice president of U.S. ministries for World Relief, primarily working in the area of refugee resettlement, immigration legal services, and anti-trafficking work. And I'm currently working at the National Immigration Forum. And one piece of my portfolio there at the National Immigration Forum is refugees. And I've been there at the National Immigration Forum now for nearly 7 years.
Thank you, Dan. Sarah, last, obviously not least.
Thanks. So I'm Sarah Riendeau, and I actually started my refugee work back in my undergrad, where I volunteered with a school organization, teaching English and taking care of children while the parents were in language classes. So I started out with a club at undergrad, and then afterwards I ended up doing AmeriCorps State in Pennsylvania with an organization, a separate unit called Compass AmeriCorps, which focuses on refugee issues. And they position people in refugee resettlement agencies and other organizations that assist refugees specifically in that community. So that was my AmeriCorps year, and I worked in the legal department of HIAS, which is one of those 10 organizations, those VOLAGs. And that was really kind of eye-opening to understand the refugee resettlement process and see and talk to these people about their stories. After AmeriCorps, I went into Peace Corps and I served in North Macedonia. And at that time in 2016-15, there were a lot of refugees coming through the Balkans and into Europe. Even though Peace Corps told us we were not allowed to interact with those refugees or volunteer or do anything, even though I really wanted to, due to politics and of the host country. I was able to kind of listen to the news and talk to the locals and understand the Macedonian and Albanian perspective of the migrants that were going through the Balkans at the time, which was really beneficial for me to understand all the different dynamics of what's happening in the refugee world. After Peace Corps, I went back to the United States, and I did some volunteering in Greece, actually. So I did some other things that were not refugee related. And then I went to Greece and I worked for 3 months with a NGO that was teaching English and doing some mentor activities for the youth there on one of the islands near Turkey. So that was one of the most beneficial refugee things I've done in my entire career. It was really impacting to see these people coming straight off the boats from Turkey and seeing how they're experiencing, Europe for the first time, a lot of culture shock, talking to them about their stories. So I'm sure I can go into that later if you want to know more about that. And then, so I also did my master's after that in conflict studies and human rights in the Netherlands. And I did my field research for my master's thesis in the Balkans, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, studying the Balkan migration crisis and the organizations there and the government and how they kind of intertwine and help migrants that are traveling through that area. And currently, actually, I worked at USAID as well for a while, not with refugees, but in some of the projects that are around the world trying to stabilize and make sure we don't need to hopefully stabilize so we don't have as many refugees and IDPs. And then I moved over to USCIS, Immigration Services under Homeland Security, where I'm a refugee officer, where I travel internationally to the refugees who are applying for refugee status in the United States, and I interview them and make the decisions whether they can come to the United States or not. So that's a little bit about me, and look forward to talking to you all.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, all. As just indicated by everybody here on this panel, wealth of information, wealth of different backgrounds, and a lot of different pathways to get to where they're currently at. And that's what I love hearing about from different Peace Corps volunteers, because especially when it comes to working with refugees and IDPs, it's the stories that matter, it's the backgrounds that matter, and it's the where you're coming from and where you're trying to go, and how can the people in front of you and the other people that work for the 10 different volunteer organizations and all across the entire board from beginning to end to make sure that those individuals are able to seek the assistance and get the access that they're looking for. So kind of from that, I've heard a couple different degrees, I've heard a couple different pathways. We'll go around quickly doing a little bit of popcorn style as we've got 30 minutes to go through the different questions that we have to make sure that we're able to get through as much as possible. The first one that I'm going to start off with, and we'll go through these as quickly as possible, and we'll start off with Sarah and snake backwards, is what is a primary skill that you've taken from your service or that you've really seen and needed to grow over the past several years since you've completed Peace Corps?
So I'm going to even go back to my AmeriCorps service before Peace Corps. Is in the refugee world, you hear a lot of stories that are traumatic, that people have a lot of things that have happened to them in the world, and they're telling you and looking for you for support. So whether you're in social services or legal or, there's a lot going on in the refugee world, but you need to be able to internalize that and make sure that you don't get secondary trauma. That is a main, make sure that you are focusing on your mental health when you're working with refugees. I'm sure a lot of people in this panel would agree with me that is a big issue, because you not only have to assist the person in front of you, but you can also have that trauma as well, just from listening to these stories over and over. And the other thing is making sure that you don't burn out. This world, especially in the NGO world, you burn out very quickly because you want to help everybody and you can't help everybody. So you do what you can for the people that are in front of you.
Yes, Judith, I'll write that question into the chat for you.
Okay. So I've seen a lot of my colleagues in different positions burn out or become numb to the refugees and not able to really respond or effectively assist them because their own personality, their own mental health is not being taken into account. So that's one thing that I've learned, and I'm actively working on in all of these positions I've been in and growing and seeking to make sure that I maintain. So.
Thank you. And before I continue on going backwards, that was actually the next question that I had, is about burnout, is on how do you make sure that you're taking care of yourself? And I'll turn to either Judith or Anneke, as I saw you nodding your heads quite quickly there, as Sarah was speaking about some of that work, and especially since as social workers as well.
Oh, sorry, Judith.
No, go
Yes, I mean, this just kind of just to echo what Sarah said, and especially like social work training, I always say self-care. You can only serve to the best of your ability. And so if you're coming in like, strung out or or just numb, you're not able to offer that care and support to the populations you're working with. And it's very traumatic, the folks that you're working with, as far as the stories or even the frustrations of just daily, I mean, they're frustrated and sometimes you're frustrated, working in some of the pathways that we have here, or just how convoluted some things can be. So again, I think I said this earlier, just perseverance, and that goes along with again, that burnout, but recognizing when you need to step back a little bit. And I would say in this from a social worker perspective as well, like if you have like a supervisor or someone that you can talk to and talk through some of these feelings, if you don't on like a professional level, that I mean, just talking with a friend of just like, I'm feeling frustrated, or and just or a hobby or something to just kind of back off a little bit. That's very helpful, and to kind of keep you going on that.
Thank you so much.
ahead.
Dan
Yeah,
Kosten. Oh, no, Judith, go for it.
No, I just wanted to add to what has already been said and say that part of self-care is also setting boundaries. It's healthy for everyone involved, right? If you have a client walk in and you know that you only have an hour, right, that you can spend with them. They didn't have an appointment, whatever the case may be, but they're going through something, they need answers, right? And you only need an hour. Just setting that boundary when at the beginning of the meeting can go such a long way. And it's important for everyone involved for, mental health, so that you don't burn out, all of the above that has already been said.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Dan Kosten, throughout your illustrious career, what kind of skills have you been able to really pull out and be able to focus in on that you were able to grow since the very beginning?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting when you think about returned Peace Corps volunteers entering into the area of refugee resettlement. I think many of us come actually with our own experience of crossing cultures. So I think that is probably why we're drawn back into this area. I've been in this area for a long time, and I'm often am asked, what brought you into this area? And I think the answer to that is having cross culture. I personally know some of the challenges involved and the difficulties involved in crossing cultures. At the same time, I also have experienced firsthand the welcome that was extended to me in crossing that culture, and want to then return the same to those who are coming here to the United States. So it's a payback. It's really giving back for what I learned and experienced in going to another culture. So I think the cross-cultural dynamic and cross-cultural skills are extremely important. And then I would just add that what's already been said, and that is just, you're running a marathon here. This isn't a sprint. You have to have a mental state of that this is a long-term commitment. And the other thing related to that is celebrate the small successes. There are so many times when we have grandiose ideas of what we're going to achieve, and we become frustrated that they're not happening. Therefore, celebrate all the small victories. So that's what I would add.
Thank you. Thank you. Dan McBrayer, I know that we had unpinned you and pinned you back in. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. We did receive one question on being able to get into the field of refugee resettlement in the first place. And I know that you've been able to choose that you wanted to work at PRM, and then you were able to find your way and ultimately wind up at PRM. How were you able to do that? And what kind of skill sets were you able to start looking at to make sure that that happened?
So I'm going to try to narrow what could be a very circuitous story. So in 2016, when I was job searching, I did an informational interview at PRM because, as I said, for a long time I wanted to work at PRM, and I was able to get an interview with a deputy assistant secretary, so pretty high up, to find out about what she did, what refugee resettlement was like at that level, and it was 30 minutes. Did it? It was great. I had some takeaways. And thought, that was it. So fast forward to 2022 and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that's my Peace Corps neighborhood, and I already told you about Russia invading Georgia and that side. So all of this compelled me to try to reach out and do something for Ukrainians. And so I found an old email from 2016, and I thought, it's worth a shot. So I just took a chance, and I wrote this former deputy assistant secretary, who happened to be the assistant secretary at the time, and I think acting. And within 2 weeks, I got a response saying, would you like to help us, not with Ukrainians, but with Afghans? We have a need. And one of the main reasons why they selected me was my Peace Corps experience, and an assumption I found out later, and an assumption that they had that I was going to have strong cross-cultural consensus building and diplomatic skills. So I'm very grateful that that assumption was made based on Peace Corps. So we worked out at a place where all Afghans were being resettled in this one place in Loudoun County, Virginia, and so many government entities were there. DOD, state, Homeland Security. It's just this crazy mixture of different federal work cultures. So I was able to apply those Peace Corps skills that they assumed I had within that cross-cultural work environment, aside from having Afghans all around. So that was how I got into the work that I had always wanted to do, taking a big chance. And then assumptions being made about me that were actually kind of true. Thank you, Peace Corps.
Now, both Dans just mentioned that you had cross-cultural needs and being able to understand contextual information and recognizing the needs of other individuals. How do you put that onto a resume?
I
I'll throw that out for everybody.
I need to write that actually into my resume at this point, so maybe someone else can coach me.
Yeah, I actually think that is something to write in a resume. The diversity that's happening in the U.S. right now, in light of my own experience now in the National Immigration Forum, is such that I would say most workplaces are becoming more and more diverse. Having some skills in cross-cultural abilities is an asset. And I think the other thing that the other Dan did mention, and I think is absolutely true of returned Peace Corps volunteers, is problem solving. I think you're thrown into situations in another country, and you're forced to begin to solve problems pretty much on your own and figure out how do I make this work. And I think those things are something that you should be writing in a resume, and that your average person may not recognize, but once they understand the experience you've been through, they will agree that you probably do have quite some problem-solving skills that any organization would be find beneficial to that organization.
Thank you, Dan and Dan. So really,
can I just chime in?
Please.
So before I know the federal resume is quite unique, and it's kind of, you don't have a lot of leeway in terms of how you're organizing it. But prior to my federal service, the way I organized my CV to highlight my international service and humanitarian work is I actually made a separate title. I didn't go linear with my timeline. I actually grouped it into legal service, international and humanitarian assistance, and education. I was a Peace Corps education volunteer. So I had experience in all those areas and different positions and volunteer work. And so I actually grouped it that way. And I would also recommend in the skills section of your resume, writing cross-cultural communication as a skill set. So those are just a couple of things that I would chime in with on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much there, Sarah. All right. Anneke, any kind of skill that you would recommend somebody putting onto their resume and as they're trying to apply for these jobs?
I think it was mainly mentioned. I actually pulled up one of my old resumes while we were talking, and I think I put thrives in complex work environments while overcoming challenges of limited resources and financial constraints. And I was like, it's an older one, but I was like, yeah, again, problem solving. And that was mentioned by Sarah, a grouping of your skill set and maybe not so much the linear. Again, it depends on what kind of job you're applying for, but and you can get that feel, of course, reaching out prior to places that you are looking to apply to. There's like someone who's working, someone you can connect with on LinkedIn and just ask about their application process, and you can kind of decide from there how you group them. But problem solving, and if you have a language skill that you want to highlight, I mean, we all have our language skills from our country that we serve, but if there's one, definitely the ability to learn a language or learn enough to survive for 2 years, I think is really important. Wording, I don't know, but somehow making
Absolutely.
that on your resume for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, have that section right underneath your skills for the languages that people speak as well as what level of proficiency that is too. Excellent. Judith, what kind of skills do you think?
Yeah, I think, and this is something that all Peace Corps volunteers have, just based on being a Peace Corps volunteer, is being able to adapt to change. You know, in the Peace Corps, you are navigating change, whether that is political change or just change in the community, right? Being adaptable, flexible, and open to change is important in how we view the world and also just the work that we do. And with that, also just building consensus when it comes to staff buy-in. If you are looking to do more of like a supervisor position. So just like in the Peace Corps, where there's constant change and you're having to kind of try to negotiate or find a way to get community buy-in. Like, for example, during my Peace Corps service, I had to convince the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Women to help me do like an outreach campaign, right? Doing that kind of work and negotiating and compromising are all things that you can definitely put on your resume. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Judith. All right. So I know everybody's on mute at this moment. I'll ask for a show of hands as we start coming to the last 15. Who of you have a master's degree? Okay. So one of the questions was, how do I get into this sector without a master's degree? And obviously the 5 of you really just kind of showcased the importance of having one, whether that's in social work, it's in international relations, it's in some type of humanitarian-based degree. I do imagine that there are a lot of different positions on the lower level, as Sarah's starting to raise her hand, to be able to start getting into things right away. Sarah.
I just want to highlight an opportunity that only works in the NGO sector, which you don't need a master's degree for. So if you're interested in legal work with international populations, there's something called an accredited representative that only works with NGOs in their legal department. But they basically do work specifically for the NGO, and the NGO has to be accredited as well. Processing and interviewing clients for immigration applications and petitions. They don't have to go to law school, but they act on behalf of the client in immigration court if they get a certain level, or for immigration petitions, they can act on behalf of the client in immigration settings. So this is something that I had considered prior to my master's and was going down that pathway before I got accepted to my master's program. So that's something that's available. You have to do a bunch of courses and trainings and kind of represent that you have a knowledge in this area, immigration. And then you send it to the Department of Justice, and they accredit you. But if you change organizations, you have to go through the process again. So it's just something, an opportunity that's out there that people can look into. It's called, Jonathan put it in the chat, accredited representative. So.
Pulling on that one just a little bit further, had another question on the side of, and I'm making sure I have it, is how do you navigate the constantly changing immigration laws? And I realize that's might be a little bit further than just the base representative position. What do you continue to read? How do you keep up with the changing climate of what's going on with refugee work and making sure that you are ahead of the curve? I'll change it to that.
So I assume that's for me, since I do work at USCIS.
Excellent.
But I'm sure a lot of the NGOs also have issues with the changing policies and making sure that they're working on behalf of their clients properly. Yes, it changes quite frequently. The immigration system is not perfect, and it's constantly being updated and improved. But you just have to go with the flow, like in Peace Corps. You have to constantly be aware of your surroundings and what's happening, what direction it might go in, and just be really flexible in understanding and adapting in the process. So that's all I'll say on that.
Thanks so much, Sarah. One question for, Judith.
No, I was just going to say from the local level, it really is just going to the ORR, PRM, for our national USCCB, those, like,
Before you get into that, what is ORR?
Office of Refugee Resettlement.
Thank you. And what does PRM stand for? And I know that Dan's itching to say that one.
It's the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration in State Department, and ORR is in Health and Human Services.
Thank you very much, Judith.
Yeah, thank you. It's really, like, I think next week I am attending the changes to our cooperative agreement, right? So it's staying on top of those meetings, going back, and usually they'll upload it to a specific website, and making sure that you are taking notes, and just, again, being flexible and adapting to change. And also on a supervision level, just creating that space for your staff, because it's frustrating, right? It is so frustrating, right? Staff, right when they just got the hang of a program, here comes a policy change, right? It's literally happening right now, right? And there are internal changes, and then there's like the federal and state level. And then you throw in an election year and things get really worrisome, right? So providing that space, a safe space for staff, is really, truly important to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then Dan Kosten.
Yeah, so just a couple of things here. One, I would say that although many of us raised our hands, I hope that doesn't scare anyone away. There are 10 agencies, but there are 350 affiliate offices. And each one of those have a large range of positions that need to be filled. And in light of what PRM has done this year, and congratulations to you, PRM, having been in this field for a long time. There's only 8 times in the history of this program since 1980 that we surpassed 100,000. So congratulations on that. Quite an accomplishment. But that means there is a high demand to get enough staff to assist in the resettlement. So I would strongly encourage people. There are people throughout in many states that affiliate offices that will be and are continuously looking for staffing. So please take advantage of that opportunity. It's a great way to get involved, and it's an easy way to also begin seeking out where you want to go, because you can certainly climb within the organization and outside the organization once you're in.
I know that USCIS also probably had a hand in that as well. Dan, over to you. McBrayer, that is.
Thank you. And I want to say that one of my favorite parts of my job is when I get to go out monitoring and not only meet with refugees who have been resettled in their homes, but also to visit the people on the ground who are doing what I call the real work of refugee resettlement. We all work on it, but the people who are on the ground, I have tremendous respect for. And when I tell my story about how I got to refugee resettlement, I have a little bit of imposter syndrome to some extent, because I didn't come through I've never worked at a local resettlement affiliate. And I really have so much respect. And Dan, you said it, like there is such need right now for staffing at the local level. And it, in my opinion, is the best way to get in, because you understand it from the ground level. And I'm having to do a lot of backtracking. 2 years in, I'm still trying to understand resettlement and what happens on the ground. So if you want to get in, you're recently returned, or you're not recently returned and you're just committed to this field, go to your local resettlement affiliate and see what jobs they may have, or volunteer there. I can't emphasize that enough.
I would second that. I think my work with the local resettlement agency in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, sorry, with IS was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my life, but the most rewarding. So it's hard work, but it's definitely
That sounds familiar, right? RPCVs?
I know, exactly.
And I saw that Anneke threw in the chat of the current openings. I'm going to be collecting all these different links to the different positions that are across the entire board and putting them onto a one-pager that will be shared out after today. Judith, I saw that your hand was raised.
Yeah, I was going to just add to what Dan was saying, and case management and job development. They offer it, both roles offer you the opportunity to be on the ground and truly connect with clients on who they are, what their aspirations are, and their story. It helps in understanding how to implement federal and state programs in a way that's strengths-based and also client-centered. And case management and job development also just allows you to gain the wisdom and to truly listen to clients' concerns and goals, and be able to advocate for the clients on a local level, sometimes on a policy level, and definitely on an organizational level. Yeah, it's really exciting work, and I agree with Dan. I did not come in through case management, and I am now taking my first RMP case, or reception and placement case, and I'm really excited about it. And I think it'll give me the wisdom that I need to implement the program.
It's humbling hearing of all your stories. And the one question that I'm going to have for you next is, what last recommendations do you have for people that are interested in breaking into this field? And Anneke, I'll start off with you. Anneke, sorry.
No, you're fine. I think I mentioned this, I mean, networking, always be networking. If refugee resettlement, there's so many, as was mentioned, there's so many organizations, but actually, like, we all know each other in some way. Like, we're on, whether it's through monitoring, whether it's through like just an organizational potluck, whether it's an advocacy event. So the world is kind of small with refugee resettlement, which is great, because at the same time, like, even the group of amazing people right here, like, I'm sure if we do like 5 degrees of separation, we will find somebody, whether it's through the Peace Corps circles or through like refugee resettlement. So I say that's the biggest thing, is just networking and interest. Like, if you're like, hey, refugee officer sounds awesome, I know nothing about it, and just be like, hey, Sarah over here, I just heard her speak about it, and I don't know much about it, but she's gonna like let you know, like, the real side of it, the nitty gritty, the like, but also like the why she does it, what's amazing. And then I think that's with all of us, or in anybody that's in any profession. It's just like, just talk to folks when you're networking. Try and understand what the job is like, and the position, and especially since it is this sector is always changing with the amount of people that we are serving, or the political climate change, or election years we mentioned, or anything that's going on at the world that could cause more or less folks that we're serving. I think it's always keep abreast with that, but with networking, get that information too. So I think that's very important.
Excellent. In that regard, what is the greatest challenge that you're seeing in the years to come? Obviously, November is going to be one of those types of conversations, and I imagine that the Peace Corps community for refugees will have a future conversation along that lines as we lead up into November. But outside of that, what is the greatest challenge for the refugee sector in and of itself?
I think the reality of refugee resettlement is, unfortunately, it is somehow linked continuously to politics. And this election is certainly going to have an impact on what could happen. Started in refugee resettlement was 2001, and many of us maybe remember what happened in 2001 on September 11th. And it took the resettlement program years to recover from what happened then. Fortunately, it seems to have learned something and recovered quite well and quite much quicker this time after COVID. But there are circumstances beyond anybody's control, such as those kinds of events that have an impact on the number of refugees that come into this country. But I think I could also say this, that you have job security, because we know this, that the displacement of people around the world is the highest it's ever been. We also know that, I think what unfortunately isn't understood is that in the last large displacement, which was after World War II, we saw about 60 million people displaced. And the creation of incredible organizations like UNHCR and the International Migration Organization, and many of the NGOs and the agencies that are now resettling refugees. And today we have over double that number of displaced people. We have 120. And the question is, why aren't we talking about this more? Unfortunately, I think the answer is because they're not from North America or from Europe. They're from other places around the world. And that's why we're not discussing it. But this displacement doubles what we saw after World War II. It's really time for the world to wake up and say, this is a crisis that needs to be addressed. And if you're interested, you will have a job if you enter into this area, because this isn't going away anytime soon.
Thanks, Dan, for saying the hard thing. As we close out from that, I'm going to turn back to Anne and Evelyn before we do our final wrap up on things.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Really great work that you're doing, and I appreciated all of your comments and your suggestions for those who want to get into the field of working in refugee resettlement. On behalf of Peace Corps Community for Refugees, actually, it was in the chat. Dan Kosten said it very well, sort of the spirit behind Peace Corps Community for Refugees, and that is to really we want refugees to feel as welcome here as we were when we went overseas in Peace Corps. So that's what Peace Corps Community for Refugees is all about. We are a totally volunteer-run organization, and we want to connect people to the resources and the opportunities that are available in the field of refugee resettlement. So this is one of those aspects, is doing this webinar today. And thank you so much, Jonathan and RPCVnexus, for hosting this. We do have a couple more webinars coming up. I don't know if we have a slide on that or not, Jonathan. We've got 4 more, 2 formal and 2 informal webinar sessions on Zoom coming up. The next one, as I alluded to earlier, we don't have the details on it yet. It's talking about advocacy, and it's later in November after the election. So after the election, then we'll work on how we need to frame that session out. But that's talking about advocacy around refugee resettlement. And then in December, we have another one that is highlighting, it's a showcase, highlighting what some of the people in the Peace Corps community are doing to support refugees in their community, mostly on a volunteer basis. And then in between, we have what we call conversations. And it's really kind of an open Zoom time. People can come in and start conversations, ask questions. They can network with other people who are on the Zoom call. They can, try to get more information on what they're looking for and how they want to get engaged with refugees, and they can share their stories as well. So it's a very informal, unstructured conversation. That's what those conversations are there. That's all on our website. We do encourage you all to join us. It's totally free. Just go to our website, pcc4refugees.org, and you can join us for free. You can sign up for all of those webinars. You can also learn about some other opportunities. We are always looking for volunteers. So if you don't have a job yet, or even if you do have a job in this field and you want to help out Peace Corps Community for Refugees, we have some opportunities for you to get engaged with us. We have 3 teams. We have a communications team, we have an advocacy team, we have a partnership team, and then we also have an urgent need right now, actually, for people to help us with database and website support. If you have those skills, we would love to hear from you. Thank you, Christine, who is our communications head here. She just put in the chat that we're also on Facebook and Instagram. So please look for us there as well. Again, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you to all of you who are working in this field. It is so important. And I look forward to staying connected with all of you. I and all of us on behalf of Peace Corps Community for Refugees look forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Thanks so much there, Anne. Really do appreciate and the chance to be able to partner with you all today. On that note, as Anne was saying, for those that are looking for different jobs and opportunities, feel free to reach out to us. We are going to have more conversations and one-off resume review support opportunities over the months to come, as we have in the past and continue to do so with RPCVnexus. We just did a second workshop on working on a resume going into the Peace Corps' virtual job fair that is going to be happening this coming Thursday. I do not have the link for that one, unfortunately. That is on the Peace Corps website for those that are interested in looking for jobs, just in general. And of course, I'll share out the links to the various groups that our panelists were able to speak to today, and more so as in the days to come. And as always, thank you so much for joining another conversation as we discuss the pathways from service into careers, and especially for refugee resettlement. This is one that is obviously a hot topic, both going into politics and into the elections this year, but then more importantly, just kind of in general and helping out humans across the world. And also, thank you very much to Sarah, who just threw into the chat, and I'm resharing there, the sign up for the career fair itself. I know that we've got many people that are on this that are looking for jobs, and that's why we have these types of conversations. So keep an eye out as we do more. We're going to have some conversations this coming November in a few weeks on how to get into graduate school, and then also with the Coverdell program on how to pay for graduate school. So check us out. We'll continue having these conversations, and we look forward to working with you and supporting you in the future as well. So thank you, Anne, Evelyn, Anneke, Dan, Sarah, and Judith. Have a great evening, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.